Alright guys, welcome to Monday's directions video. Today's pretty simple. I'm just going to go through some notes. We're just taking notes in class today. So I'm going to go through the PowerPoint with you guys right now. Obviously, make sure you're checking in for attendance if you're at home, so we can make sure we can avoid all that situation, excuse me. But alright, I only got 15 minutes on this program that I use, so I'm going to hop right into it. Some of the stuff that we kind of haven't really been able to talk to in person is hieroglyphics. So make sure you kind of understand what they are, right? We know it's kind of a Egyptian writing. Um, and obviously we know the hieroglyphs would go on either the pyramid walls, some other walls, or obviously on the papyrus. Now the hieroglyphs, we did not know what they meant for the longest time until we found this thing. Okay, until we found the Rosetta Stone. Now the Rosetta Stone in modern times, it's like a program that helps you learn new languages, and that's basically what it is. The Rosetta Stone was found by this guy here named Champlain. This dude was with Napoleon, France's Napoleon, when he was making through his conquests. So we didn't really have the Rosetta Stone. Obviously, Napoleon a lot longer in the future compared to ancient Egypt. So up until that point, we really didn't know much about the hieroglyphs until this guy found it. And the hieroglyphs were basically Rosetta Stone. It has the hieroglyphs translated into Latin. And back in this time period, this guy's time period, everyone knew Latin. So it was pretty easy to then decipher the hieroglyphs. So we did that. With the Middle Kingdom, guys, the one thing we just want to know is who are the Hyksos. And we know that the Hyksos are the group that's controlling Egypt during the Middle Kingdom. That's the test question. The test question is, who's controlling Egypt during the Middle Kingdom? And it's the Hyksos. And we don't really talk too much about the Middle Kingdom. For us in here, we just want to know Middle Kingdom is the time period where the Hyksos are in control. And that's it. Okay, so that's the Middle Kingdom, and then we move on to the New Kingdom. So we're almost done with the unit. So the New Kingdom, as you can see here, pharaohs of the New Kingdom presided over a prosperous and productive society. Agricultural surpluses supported a population of perhaps 4 million people, which was absolutely massive for the time period. A highly stratified society according to profession and position in government. The New Kingdom is not the Old Kingdom. They did not build pyramids, right? Did not build enormous pyramids, but they erected numerous temples, palaces, and monumental statues to advertise their power and authority. And we'll look at some of those structures. Thutmose III expanded empire into Eastern Mediterranean as well as North Africa and Nubia and others. So the New Kingdom, they're expanding. We're not building pyramids. We're just building different things like obelisk and different temples for certain people. And we start to get some changes during the Middle Kingdom as well. Or during the New Kingdom, I should say. So some of the main players in the New Kingdom is Thutmose III, Pharaoh Tutankhamun, or King Tut, as everyone knows him, and Ramses II. These are kind of the main players in the New Kingdom. So we're going to kind of look at them individually and kind of spend a day or on them, making sure we get them down. Egyptian nobility. I think we just got to know that there's class systems. That's basically it. There's a nobility system. We know that the more you're linked to the religion, or the more that you're kind of linked to the gods, the higher up in Egyptian status you are. We know that peasants are on the bottom end. Well, not the bottom end, because there's always slaves, okay? Now, for Egyptian women during this time, I'm going to kind of talk to you about some interesting stuff. There's like 3 must-haves that every single kind of like tomb that they've kind of went through has. So first and foremost, perfume, okay? Just like today, I feel like perfume is very popular. There is a bunch of mirrors. Obviously, looking and looking the way that you want and kind of your physical appearance is important to them. Now, the one here I want to talk more about is wigs. Now, why would wigs be a must-have for an Egyptian woman? And here's the thing. In Egypt, during the New Kingdom, they had an incredible lice outbreak. So everyone had hair like me. They were just shaving their heads to get the lice out, and then the women would just wear wigs. Guys, too, but a lot of the guys would just rock the bald look. So it's a really interesting part in history where literally most of the women are wearing wigs, especially if you're from like the higher class, I should say, more than anything. So interesting. I'm going to throw that on the test question, so make sure you know that. They're wearing wigs because there's a lice outbreak. It's kind of something fun to throw on a test to help you guys out. So we have that. We know the priestly class. We're going to skip over that. Now here's the guy we got to talk about, Akhenaten. All right, and we want to know that he's the first monotheist. He tries to do a revolutionary religious kind of shakeup. Instead of worshiping all these different gods, he's trying to make them worship one God, and it's the sun god. All right, and now that we're worshiping one God, we're no longer a polytheistic society. We're now a monotheistic society. All right, so we want to know that Anakhdin, he tries to change basically the entire religious structure of Egypt, and we know that that's the most important part. So he tries to do a radical shakeup and make people worship one God, the sun god. But it kind of catches on for a little bit, but a lot of people are skeptical. They think that he's kind of like spitting in the faces of the real gods by focusing on this just one of them. Okay, so it doesn't work. It obviously, people go with it for a little bit because he's the pharaoh, and he is supposed to have, he's a walking god. But as time goes on, people become less and less of a fan, and they go back to becoming a polytheistic society. But it is important to note that, though. So you want to know this guy's name. Anakhdin, the first monotheist, him and his wife, and we'll talk about her later on. And so we'll see during this time period, we see the Ankh is basically the cross of life, and it's kind of the symbol of their monotheistic society during that time. So we know that a lot of the hieroglyphs from that time period, we know when they are. If we see this symbol, we kind of can place it under Anakhdin's rule, because that's kind of the only time that we see it. It's pretty interesting, and we know a lot of this, guys, because of all the archaeological digs. There we go. That took place, and most of them take place in this area called the Valley of the Kings. It's kind of where all the pharaohs get kind of buried. You can kind of see here all the different sites, burial sites, as you can see. So the Valley of the Kings contain tombs of 63 different kings or pharaohs. A very important archaeological dig, because a lot of information comes out of these tombs. So you want to know that. The Valley of the Kings, what is it? Well, it contains 63 different kings. Okay, it's pretty obvious what it is. It'll be on the test, but it's pretty obvious. So the Valley of the Kings is where we get a majority of this information here, especially on Anakhdin. Here we just have the big three. That's kind of interesting. The Book of the Dead that we looked at last week. Anubis right here. The Lord of the Underworld. I think this is Osiris right here. So the big three of the underworld obviously would make sense, being the Valley of the Kings. Interesting, the Shaptis, the Pharaoh's servants in the afterlife. This is where we see a bunch of interesting pieces. Now, there's two different ways that you can go about this as a pharaoh. If you die and you want to have servants in the afterlife, you can kind of have like sculptures or figures made up of your servant, and then just have that in your tomb. And then when the afterlife, the structure, or like the sculpture, turns real. I think they kind of showed that in the Book of the Dead video clip that we looked at, the 4-minute one, where the guy's talking about, yep, and then the Shaptis helped him farm when he got to the afterlife, or something like that. So you can have these little figurines that turn into people and help you farm in the afterlife, or you can do what some pharaohs did and just have your actual servants buried with you, that we talked about before. So if I'm the pharaoh and I die, my servants are killed and thrown into the tomb with me. Sorry about it, it's just the way it is. So two different ways. So the Shaptis, not going to be on the test, just kind of something interesting to go on. The journey to underworld, we kind of looked at that. The interesting is that in some pharaohs' tombs, there are, in that video, they showed the river that you kind of have to travel through in the underworld. And some of the pharaohs, for real, had ships buried with them. So, for example, this was a ship that was found inside of a tomb. It's called the Solar Barge, or the Solar Barge. And it's in King Khufu's, or Pharaoh Khufu's tomb, and it's legit a full-size boat that would be used on the Nile River. And it's inside his tomb, buried with them. There's also another boat kind of like this buried in the tomb. We can't take it out, though, because they're worried that if they open up the tomb and the oxygen gets in there, that it's going to just destroy all the artifacts or the boats that are in there. So what they're doing is they're just waiting until technology catches up, so they're able to open up a tomb without destroying all the artifacts inside. So pharaohs would sometimes literally have these giant ships buried with them. The mummies, Seti the First, very, look how well preserved he is. That's kind of why Seti the First is kind of popular. Ramses the Second becomes a big time player. He kind of has like a weird nose in my mind. I don't know why. And then Ibnotep II, the queen. Again, just other mummies, nothing too crazy. Now, one guy we got to know his name. It's Howard Carter. Howard Carter in 1922 discovers the most famous tomb of all time, and it's King Tut's tomb. Now, the child pharaoh, King Tut, we know he's young, like 12 or 13 when he dies. Um, he's famous, not really because of what he did when he was alive, but it's more, he's basically famous because his tomb is full of the biggest treasures. All right, so King Tut, he's widely studied. We know that he has a deformity in his leg. Some people say it's from like a hippo attack. Hippo attacks are very common during this time period, or a jackal attack. So some people think he was attacked by a wild animal, but a lot of scientists believe that his birth defect in his leg comes from inbreeding, because you want to keep the royal blood together, so you have brothers and sisters, having kids, and that's a bad thing genetically speaking, and sometimes you get deformities, and King Tut is an example of that. He kind of has like a little hitch in his leg, and it comes from inbreeding. And again, King Tut, only famous because of all the treasures that are in his tomb, and he was well preserved. His tomb wasn't robbed. A lot of these people, once we found their tombs in like the 20s and 30s, their tombs have already been robbed by tomb robbers. Well, King Tut was one where it did not happen. So his tomb was just full of riches, so much so that he became probably the most famous pharaoh out of the deal in modern times. But we want to know Howard Carter is the archaeologist that found it. We'll put that on the test. Howard Carter discovers King Tut's tomb. Moving along. With the Valley of the Kings, we also have the Valley of the Queens. And the most prominent, let's say, thing or structure there is the Temple of Queen Hatshepsut. Would be the big standalone thing. And we know Queen Hatshepsut ruled for her son. Her son got old enough. She didn't want to give up power, so her son had her probably killed and then literally erased her face from all the monuments and all the hieroglyphs. Queen Nefertiti is just it's the queen of Akhenaten, the guy who tried to make it a one-religion society. She's famous because of these structures right here. Akhenaten himself created these in his workshop, and they're like one of the most recreated pieces of art during the time period. And so it's kind of made her famous in modern times as well. So, interesting things. Monument to Ra, the sun god. Ramses the Great. We'll talk about him tomorrow, and this is why. Tomorrow now, we got about 2 minutes left on this thing here. We're going to look at Ramses II and kind of his outstanding achievement, and it's the Battle of Kadesh. You can spell it with a Q, you can spell it with a K. All right, so here's what we're going to look at tomorrow, and here's where we're going to spend more time on Ramses II. The Battle of Kadesh, Egypt versus the Hittites. The battle is generally dated to 1274 BC and is the earliest battle recorded in history. So write that down. That's why we know the Battle of Kadesh. It's the earliest battle ever recorded, okay, for which detailed tactics and formations are known. So there's actually detail in the battle, how it was fought, how many soldiers, and it was probably the largest chariot battle ever fought, involving perhaps 5,000 to 6,000 chariots. And it was all, and people think like back in these times that these people are very simplistic and they're just fighting to fight or fighting for ego. It's not the case. It's very similar to today's why people go to war. They're fighting over trade routes. They're fighting over the opportunity to make money. All right. And tomorrow we're going to watch a video on the Battle of Kadesh, and we're going to talk more about Ramses II himself. And we'll save the obelisk and stuff like that for Wednesday. All right, guys. Again, make sure you're going through, copying these down. I try to highlight the things that are important to us. I try to give a little bit of info. Again, if you want more info, guys, you can use the internet to help you out. Just Google the people's names and just read like the first paragraph or just read something. Again, take the learning into your own hands, guys, especially for your people at home. We talked about extreme ownership this year. Make sure you're doing it. It's a must-have if you want to be successful this year. All right, that's all I got. Obviously, if you're going to be in class tomorrow, we're going to review all this stuff. So don't worry so much if you're not getting it pat. We'll kind of put the finishing touches on tomorrow. All right, guys, that's all I got. Have a good one. Again, remember to check in with the attendance down below. See ya.